In this video I'm going to make a starter using yeast that I harvested from a previous batch of beer. First I'm going to take a little over a liter of water, put it in a pot on the stove and bring it to a boil. Once the water comes to a boil, I'm going to remove it from the heat and then stir in about a half cup of dry malt extract. Once the DME is all mixed in, we're going to bring the wort back to a boil, and then we're going to set the timer for 15 minutes and let it go. While the wort was boiling, I filled a flask with sanitizer and then put it in a hot water bath. The reason it's in a hot water bath is so that when we pour the hot wort in, it's less likely to crack. After 15 minutes of boiling, we're going to remove the wort from the heat, and then we're going to stir in about a half a teaspoon of yeast nutrient. Next we're going to put our sanitized funnel into our sanitized flask and then pour in our hot wort. Then we're going to take a sanitized piece of aluminum foil and cover the top. Then we're going to turn on the cold water and start the cooling of the wort. Also, since we're going to be using a stir plate, we're going to add our sanitized magnetic stir bar. Here you can see with a little over a liter of water and a half cup of DME, we're going to have an original gravity of about 1036. After the wort's come down to about room temperature, we're going to aerate it with pure oxygen for about 15 seconds. You can also shake the flask and that'll pretty much accomplish the same thing. This is the yeast we harvested from our last batch of beer. The fluid's a little cloudy because we've had it sitting at room temperature for about an hour and the yeast has started to pick up some activity. But we're still going to decant off most of the liquid off the top, and we're going to swirl the yeast back into a suspension and then pour it through our sanitized funnel into our cooled wort. And for the last step of the day, we're going to put our wort on our stir plate and let it go. Okay, it's the next morning and you can see that our starter has begun to ferment. Okay, it's been about 24 hours since we made our starter and looks like fermentation's over, so we're going to turn the stir plate off, move the flask to the fridge and let the yeast crash out. The starter's been in the fridge for about 12 hours now. You can see the yeast has settled out nicely. Our final gravity reading is 1010, so our starter did completely ferment. We've got the maximum amount of yeast that we could achieve. At this point our brew day is over. We made a pale ale, so now we're going to decant most of the liquid off the top of the yeast. We're going to stir our yeast back up into a suspension, then we're going to pitch our starter into a well aerated wort. We're then going to cover our fermenter with our airlock and throw it into our fermentation fridge where it's going to sit at a consistent 68 degrees. And finally, this is the next morning. You can see a couple inches of krausen on top of the beer. The airlock's going crazy and there's a lot of yeast activity in that wort. So all in all, looks like things were a success and we'll look forward to drinking this thing in a couple weeks.